Good morning, everybody. Welcome to First Center. Today's talk is a bit of a metaphysical talk. It's had a couple different names over the weekend. I think what's circulating is no church, and you'll understand why as we go along. A church, what you're really looking for is not found in a church, is what I'm going to start by saying, as I welcome you to the center here in New York, to our virtual community. Good morning, everyone. We have a couple guests, or I shouldn't call them guests, they're members. Today we're going to be talking about catching up, which was our second title for today. We're always catching up in some way or another. Dostoevsky, famous author, many of you may have read back in high school or college, once asked the question, how many ideas have there been on earth in our history which were completely unthinkable 10 years before the things appeared? Many, right? Yet they were destined to come forth, and as they did, they came forth out of nowhere, and it seems like everybody got the same idea about the same time. Now, I've told you another story over the years, and it was about it came from Ken Kai's material, the 100 Monkey story. You might remember that, where there was a mother baboon trying to teach her babies how to clean sweet potatoes, and she was doing so for years. And eventually, as she was teaching everyone how to do this improved way of handling sweet potatoes, something happened where they started to be doing it all over the place. So in other words, it's an idea whose time has come. So that goes back to the author, Dostoevsky, when he asked the question, how many ideas on earth in our history came forth that were unthinkable only a few years before? Life is always going forward, and it's going forward where things show up at the appointed time. Discoveries come forward just out of nowhere and seem to start appearing everywhere at the same time. I have a metaphysical lesson today for you. It explains how we're always seeming to catch up. Life seems to go forward. You can see it in your own life now. You can see it in America. And my God, the change is amazing. And it's like, it's not stoppable. We're always catching up. So a clue to the wise is it's probably a good idea to expect change, because change is always happening. Things come forward. We have a saying here in our teaching, perfect place, perfect time, and all the time. So we want to keep waking up and catching up. And when we talk about waking up, that's by tuning in. When we turn within and we connect and we allow the communication to come forward, it will. If we still ourselves, in other talks we've talked about taking the pause, as we slow down and do that and listen, I often say what has been said to me for 30 years, there is that which is within you that knows, and it will inform you. I'm thinking of our dear Reverend Theodora this morning, because she would say, there is that which is within you that knows, and it shows. It will show you the way. There's a wonderful writer who I've been referring to for over 30 years. William Edelin was a columnist. He wrote lots of really fantastic pieces. You have to dig around to find them, but they're really great. And he had one piece entitled The Wolf, the Dragonfly, and I Are One. And it's an article that's meant something to me, and he will describe in it a relationship with his wonderful pet, Shiva, which I'm sure you will like. As I think of his article about his pet Shiva, it reminds me of my dog Spirit. Edelin on his wall in his study had a large vertical picture. You can imagine it. He had an American Indian, and above that picture of the Indian was a very distinguished wolf. And underneath that was a picture of a dragonfly. And it was enframed with 3 words underneath. And it said, "The wolf, the dragonfly, and I are one." Okay, the wolf, the dragonfly, and I are one. We are one. This man was teaching, and this is what he wrote. From his article, he said that science today is confirming with the things that many of us in spirituality have always known, that we have a mystical connection and a relationship with other human beings, and we have a relationship with life everywhere. Today, I saw yesterday pictures of the cosmos, pictures I've never seen before. It's like shows you like from the Big Bang Theory going forward. It's just mind-boggling. When we have a mystical connection to everything, all the beings, all the plant and animal life everywhere, you can think of it in different ways. You can think of it as energy. The language that you describe it doesn't really matter as much as you understand the connection that we have with all of life. It's really, when I say mind-boggling, it's informing and it's wonderful. The universe is alive, and we are so connected with everything. So Edelin was mentioning in the article, and he was confirming now what we know in New Thought, and we've always suspected, we've always taught. And I was thinking we can go back to the early years of this country in America when it was forming, the revolutionary times. There was Thomas Paine, which one of our founders, he said something, I think he said it well. Thomas Paine said, men and books, like humankind and books, will lie. And then sounding a bit like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Thomas Paine said, only nature never lies, because nature is always unfolding. People have perceptions. I can tell you something, I think I'm telling you the truth, but it could turn out to be not the truth, because people are always coming from wherever they're coming from. And there's nothing wrong with people. People are expressing themselves at the level and the place where they are, and we understand that that's the magnificence of it all, that we're all expressing ourselves with the best we have at the time. But nature never lies. And then there's Mark Twain, who said, humans or humankind is the only animal that blushes or needs to. In all of creation, and you consider everything that you can imagine that's alive, no creature has any knowledge of falsehoods. They live in you think of my dog, you can think of animals. They live in this place of aliveness. And as you can think of the animal kingdom, be it a beautiful horse or your kitten or your pet dog or anything you can imagine, fish, turtles, whatever you have as pets, anything in nature lives in the eternal moment. They're always in the now. My dog really can't remember yesterday. Thank God. He's always present, wagging his tail. He's there to greet you with joy. That's what his function is. These creatures live in the eternal moment, in the eternal now, and we could all learn from them. Because we have a tendency to hang on to things from yesterday, last week, last year. We have scorecards, and that really gets in the way. They don't think in terms of the future, how many years they have left or what their ailments are. They're always in the now. As you imagine the great grasslands of this vast continent, and then imagine beyond our continent to others, and think of the animals and everything that exists, everything living in various rhythms, ebbs and flows, and all the movement, the spontaneous movement. And then think of the people and just life everywhere, teeming life, everyone with feelings and responses to the present. When you spend some time in nature, and that could be by the water, it could be out in the middle of any country, wherever you are in nature, the mountains, anywhere, you can easily connect and get a sense of this awesome perfection. In this particular writing that I'm talking about today, Mr. Edelin spoke about his visit to the doctor, where the doctor simply said, "You need to get a dog." And this, of course, made me smile. Someone told me the same thing long ago, and I've had a dog ever since. There's been about 4 boxers before Spirit. It could be a kitten for you, it could be a turtle, it could be anything really. But he was suggesting that. And I'm saying for the many of my friends who live in apartments, consider a pet. It'll do you great good. Soon thereafter, Mr. Edelin received what was called the love of his life, which was a little dog called Shiva. Edelin was a very famous columnist. A couple weeks ago, I was using Irma Bombeck. She was another very famous columnist. He often wrote about the connection we have with animals and with life all around us. He said it was a psychic or spiritual connection. He happened to be friends with the dean of the medical school at the University of Alabama. His name was Dr. Charles Flowers. And Dr. Flowers, of course, wrote medical books used all over the country. And he had said, he had a boxer too. Dr. Flowers said his boxer came back to him in his dreams to say goodbye. So Edelin was really convinced, and he was very passionate about the connection that we have with life. Not just your pets, but with life everywhere. Now, many people my age, perhaps, or older, will remember a name, at least a name if you don't remember him, Dr. Albert Schweitzer. Dr. Schweitzer was a medical doctor, and he had doctorates in just about every field: theology, philosophy, I think math, I'm not sure, but brilliant. And everyone was talking about him, I remember when I was a kid. He's somebody you would enjoy reading about. Anyway, Dr. Schweitzer had an animal hospital in Africa, if you might look him up. He absolutely loved life and all of the creatures of life, and he was taking care of many different kind of animals. And he was found oftentimes in the nighttime and the daytime to be talking to the animals. He wrote in one of his journals that animals do not live on after death in other dimensions. He said, if they do not live in other dimensions, he said, then humans will not either, saying the soul of the animal is as sacred as life anywhere. Noting that we hate to think of ourselves as animals, we're part of the kingdom, we're human beings. We probably don't like thinking of ourselves in this way, but we are individualizations of spirit. But the fact is, God is everywhere. God is in everything. God is in all creatures. So the great Schweitzer thought human beings are at their best and their most ethical when we're considering every single thing is alive. Every plant, every encounter with people, you're encountering God in all things. You can see it in your pets, you can see it in the people, you can see it in the streets of New York or wherever you are. It's always a namaste experience. If you're awakened, you will see it in all things and everyone. And that's quite a high calling, to keep on seeing the good, the God in everything, every encounter. Being a holy encounter, see, you have the ability to bring that forth within you and to live your life that way. Edelin next mentioned a New York Times article entitled "The Animal Connection." And don't try to find it because it's quite a while back. I tried. The article spoke of the benefit of having a pet or a cat again or whatever. And I love this part where the article said, don't worry about your cardiovascular workouts, right? Or oat milk or oat bran or an aspirin a day to try to make yourself live longer, heal faster, to lower your blood pressure and cholesterol. You'll have a far better chance of surviving a heart attack with a pet. And then I'm sure in fun, he said, get a dog. He said dogs should be making house calls and making the rounds in the wards. Now, I have a cousin, Blaze, who's, wherever I see her on Facebook, she's always posting pictures of these three beautiful, there may be four, golden retrievers, which she has brought to have trained them to be like brought into hospitals, nursing homes, where people are sick, where people who've maybe veterans, I'm not sure all the places she goes. But that's what she does. And she brings them into these various places, senior centers, long-term care places. And you might not think of that as a great thing, but it's a great thing. It brings joy to her. Every time I see a picture of her, there's always these dogs. But this is what she does. And they do unspeakable good for people. The author that inspired me today also cited his mother being in a nursing home in Idaho where a miracle happened, he said. They had finally made a decision to allow dogs to come into many of the rooms. And he said it was a miracle because every single person was filled with a new kind of life and joy that they hadn't had. Smiles and laughter and affection poured out of these people who otherwise might have been, somewhat miserable. So he said it was a miracle. And the next point is, as I was thinking, kind of a sad one. No other species other than humankind has ever tortured or deliberately done anything to any other species. So here we are, the apex of creation, we think, right? And we're the one who are capable of doing all these experiments and things with animals. No other animal does anything like that to any other species. Mr. Edelin hoped people would stop in the future and start to develop a sense of the sacred in life. He loved most the culture of the American Indian because they seem to best understand the relationship we have with all the creatures of the earth. He suggested that we think of our youth, where I remember there were parks and things where you'd watch squirrels and chipmunks. I don't know if different parts of the world if you see the same things, probably. Or in the fields you might notice rabbits or perhaps deer. Whatever you might recall, maybe not your youth, maybe recently. And if you think about nature and all the creatures and the birds and the aquatic animals, let yourself understand that we are all parts of the same creative process. All of these creatures, they have the same sun and the same wind, and they're warmed again by the same sun. They drink the same water, and we are all created by the same source. Mr. Edelin is, again, a wonderful columnist, and he wrote several books, and he recommended books. One was entitled When Elephants Weep by Jeffrey Ivelson, and another was In Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, by, I think it was Rupert Sheldrake. And once again, in the same article, he was quoting Albert Schweitzer by saying, human beings are the most ethical only when we consider every living cell, plant, and animal as sacred and divine. So that's a tall order, but I'm passing it on to you today. I don't know that I live it as well as I'd like. But again, we're at our best when we consider every living cell, every plant, every creature as being sacred and divine. And that goes for people too. I'm happy to have been able to share this with you today because it leads right back into mysticism, obviously, when you realize that everything is a part of Source. Now, we are a New Thought Center. We teach you about metaphysics here. We teach you a metaphysical approach. We talk to you about learning to live an affirmative life. And affirmative life has really seemed the good in what? Everything. There's different approaches. We don't necessarily say ours is the best. We say ours is a way. There's nothing weird or strange about metaphysics. There have been metaphysical organizations around for a long, long time. They've been around before Ernest Holmes. And And there's others like us that have been around while we have been around. And they're teaching, for the most part, the same thing. Some of them, the ones you know, will be unity churches, religious science centers or churches, New Thought centers. We've had various names. Our real legal name is First Church of Religious Science. We've been around longer than some of the organizations. And before I even knew of religious science, I was involved in New Thought. I didn't know it was religious science, but I was teaching people how to elevate their conversations, how to love themselves, and how to extend that with one another. I know most of everybody who finds us today initially finds us through Louise Hay, because her book became such a phenomenon with millions of people. The thing to know about Louise Hay, in case you're coming to us and you're new and you're hearing about us in social media, Louise received her metaphysical instruction, her training, right here with First Church of Religious Science. Every Sunday when we come together, we're introducing you, and Thursday too, if it's our self-healing class, we're introducing you to a new way to view life, where we start to see the world and the cosmos as one. That word oneness will loom over you as you get involved in the teaching. And it's a good thing, because it'll pull you out of the idea of separation. You'll begin to hear words that could seem strange to you unless you've been around a while. Words that certainly seemed strange to me many years ago. Again, phrases like oneness. In my third year of study, it seems it was the only word I ever heard. Or Deepak Chopra would talk about a unitary field of existence. Others will call us a source, or they'll talk about the force or the energy. Any and all of these are commonly used in New Thought circles. As you enter into this type of thinking, into this philosophy, into this understanding, we start to realize in varying degrees that everything seems to be connected to everything else. Everything is alive. I remember when I was in my late 20s, someone telling me this podium is as alive as you are. And I like, what the hell is he talking about? But the thing is, if you start to get that whole idea that there's energy and there's God and it is all that there is, you start to slowly start to understand this word oneness a little bit more. We start to realize to different degrees, again, that everything seems to be connected to everything else. And this begins to make sense. When you hear us say every week that you are an individualization of this one life or this one spirit, we might say you're one with life. So these are phrases you'll hear here. When you hear this, you're going to begin to understand that you are connected with your brother. This is an old idea from Christianity. Love your brother as yourself. Love your sister as yourself. Don't judge anybody. Be the good Samaritan, because everybody's a part of everybody else. And everybody's here on the planet. You might not like the way they're showing up, but they're showing up with what they got, the best they have. And as much as you've evolved to be who you are today, and I'm going to suggest that most of us are probably more compassionate, more loving today than we were at different points in our past, it's because each of us are evolving. All of life is. Life is moving forward so fast with everything it's discovering. And again, we're always in the place of catching up. The Spirit moves forward, with or without us. And it moves forward by means of us. So we have an option always to tune in. And then we can decide anew if we can put ourselves into a new moment. If we stay caught up in what it used to be like when we're married to so-and-so, or what it used to be like with whatever church or center, that used to be like conversation's always a trap. So we embrace change. We know life is going forward. We know that we're in it, and we're a point of awareness in it, and that we're always being informed by it because we're a part of it. Once we begin to understand all of that, this connection, that we're part of Spirit, well, then life starts to change. And, you will drift off here and there, and you will certainly, most likely, we have our old beliefs and they creep in, and then we get lost for a bit, but we'll come back. Because Spirit is always wooing us, and this is what we do. We forget, and then we remember. The more we stay in touch with our teaching, the more we will keep remembering, and we will drop our stories. There's always something within each of us, beneath the surface, that is connected. Things will come to you in your quiet moments, in your aha moments. They'll come to you out of the blue, all the old expressions. They'll come to you through your dreams. But you really can't stop this whole thing that's called spirit, because it's always coming forward. And this is very good, because each of us are a part of this grand creative process. In a very true sense, the universe needs each of us and every one of us, because it moves forward by means of all of us. Each of us play a part, and an important part. One of the very coolest aspects of this is, as you begin to wake up, and you realize that you are a child of the Most High. Or if you want to use more modern language, you might think that you are a spark of this divine energy. You are a point of awareness in it. And that's good too. Any of these phrases, whatever it is that causes you to just realize the connection you have and how wonderful it is to be you. The language you use doesn't matter as much. It's not as important. It's just as you start to contemplate these ideas. When I say it's overwhelming, it can really bring you to a place where, look, I have no need to do this anymore. I'm going to be like Jesus. I'm going to be about my Father's business. Because this other stuff that I've been talking about and dwelling in and all of that is getting me no place I really want to go. So we have awakenings along the way. Our classes, Thursday night. Tuesday night, we're doing a really good Science of Mind presentation. Our classes will never tell you what to think. We provide a space, now mostly it's virtual, that's growing more and more. We're reaching hundreds of people. We come together as like-minded people several times a week now, where we can be reminded that we are in fact individualizations of spirit. You don't come to a church or a center to worship necessarily. That's kind of an old idea. You come to a place like this to be around like-minded people who celebrating, this great fact where we realize who we are, and we have some ideas how you can use this power that comes from Ernest Holmes, and where we can be encouraged to let go of many of the things that we have been doing throughout our life that are self-defeating. There's lots of ways that people self-sabotage, and they're doing so not intentionally. So we keep on reminding one another of the greatness that lies within and the power that we have to use. The power that will lift ourselves up and will lift our families up and our communities. We gather together, and we are a powerful group, and we're doing very special and important work at a time where it's really so needed. We're doing it for ourselves, and we're doing it for the world. Sometimes we like to quote the colorful Reverend Ike, who inspired many by saying, you can't lose with the stuff or the things we use. I want to explore a little bit more metaphysics today and mysticism. We're always being asked questions about these subjects, and usually I just refer people to our classes. Some general observations about mysticism that I picked up from reading the Edelin material this weekend is the affirmative approach, the mystical approach that we're talking about is always happening now. I already said that. I remember when I was studying years ago, Ram Dass, be here now was the advice. Now what does that mean? It means drop everything you're thinking about everything and everyone, and anything that who's ever wronged you or whatever you think is off or bad or what, and be here now. And when you're in the now, you can really understand I'm creating everything to be something or another, and I can stop it. And you can, in the affirmative prayer process too, you can state the truth, And when things come up to you, which are like unbeliefs or like, oh God, I'm not there yet, the negatives, you can neutralize those negatives. Once you can understand what you're doing and doing to yourself, you can, in the now, you can do things that are corrective. That's why we teach affirmative prayer. That's why it's such a powerful process. And we do teach it here, and I'd be happy to teach it to anyone personally, and I'm sure Reverend Judith would as well. It's a powerful process. So, but in the teaching in general is about developing the affirmative approach, seeing the God or seeing the good. When we get in touch with our intuition and when we get in touch with our feelings and we start to notice what's coming up for us in new moments, that has nothing to do with the future. That has nothing to do with the past. It's right here in front of you. And this is where everything happens, is in the now. This affirmative approach, this mystical approach, if you want to call it that, has nothing to do with anything bizarre, nothing to do with the occult, nothing to do with anything vague or mysterious. It's nothing otherworldly, and it's a very natural thing. As you start to get involved in this and you start awakening, it's like you're coming out of a slumber where you've been asleep and where you start to see things more clearly. Eventually, as you do this practice, you arrive at a higher place where you can see more. It's not that you see better, you just see more. And I would, it's just, if you can imagine, if you're focused on seeing the God or the good, if this is your approach and you're being a lifter and you're being the encouraging person, if you're hitching your wagon to the stars, you're a person that's going to stand out in a crowd because your whole approach towards life is not talking about ain't it awful, you're talking about what's good. My personal experience was important to me. We always encourage people to practice, seeing the cup is half full or full, right? Practice seeing the God and the good. This was my gift from Edwina Gaines. She used those two words interchangeably, God and good. Practice seeing every situation and every people, every person as good. As you do this more and more, the truth becomes revealed. You become more quiet, and you will realize judgments of all kinds are a mistake. You'll come to understand that everyone is doing their best. And you're going to start releasing the need to judge, and you're going to start releasing the need to criticize yourself. And you're going to have a sense of compassion for yourself and for the world at large. Ernest Holmes never saw his philosophy as being something that would turn into a church. It wasn't his desire for us to be churches. He didn't like the idea. He didn't like the idea of churches with governing bodies. He had a bit of a disdain for them because Ernest loved the teaching itself, and he always knew it was about you and your own personal experience. That's all we're ever teaching here, is you in developing your own connection with Source, realizing that you're one with Source, and that you have the ability to transform your life by means of your consciousness. So Ernest was thrilled with anyone who practiced it. As soon as religions start getting organized, that's where the trouble seems to start. It's always been that way with every type of organized faith. So one of the keys to understanding metaphysics is understanding that the truth will be revealed to you through your experience, through your practice. Judith or I can give you a nice talk. We like to do that, right? But it's really about you working with you, right? So please don't believe me, don't believe the ministers, don't even believe Ernest Holmes, don't believe anyone. Learn to practice it for yourself so you can have your own experience. I used to laugh 30 years ago when they told us to do affirmative prayer for parking spaces with our cars, because I thought, how silly. But the point was, start to practice it. If you start to practice seeing the good, you will then experience the good. If you keep on thinking, oh my God, life is falling apart, this is going on, that's going on, the economy, if you do that, you're going to have a different experience, because we have this thing called the law of mind, the law of cause and effect. churches, spiritual centers, the religions of old that most of us have come out of, get in trouble wherever there's doctrine, dogma, or creed. Or dualism, which is something I talk of occasionally. As you move out of all that and into mysticism, and you move into the idea of oneness, then we lay down our arms. We don't need to be right, and we don't need to be wrong. We don't need to judge. We don't need to condemn. There's an acknowledgement of spirituality in others and in all things. This is what mysticism is about. This is what New Thought is about. Increasingly, we are loving others and we're extending that peace to them. And we're trying to extend it to ourselves too. Humanity has done some very obscene things over the past 2,000 years. We'll talk about, after the time of Christ. Humanity has done some really awful things. Had there been a prevailing worldview and philosophy of mysticism, none of it could have ever happened. William Edelin, who I've been studying, said the library in Alexandria in Egypt was probably one of the greatest things of the world at the time. And he said it would not have been burned to the ground in the year 391 by the early Christians. It was one of the worst atrocities that had happened up until that time. There would not have been the Inquisition all through Europe. There would not have been slavery. There would not have been all of these endless wars that we've all experienced in our lifetime. All this violence would be unthinkable to anyone living with the worldview of mysticism, of knowing that God is in what? Everything and everyone. So this is what we're calling ourselves to do. You remember John Lennon? He had that song, Imagine, right? I need to add one more piece to this. We must contemplate ending dualism in our thinking. It's constantly the dualism is where we're constantly making something wrong. We're constantly making something wrong and right. There's a metaphysical approach where we talk about the isness of life. Life is unfolding. So we want to be mindful where we're making someone right or something wrong. That concept, that dualistic thinking, is throughout traditional religions. Dualism constantly separates men and women from the sacred. There's a great Zen master, G.T. Suzuki, and he was lecturing at Stanford University some years ago, and he had a great opening. He was talking about the world's religions. And standing in front of the students at Stanford, he spoke of the prevailing religions of the day. And he said, in them, you have men against God, and then you have God against men. Then you have man against nature, and then you have nature against man, and then you have God against nature, and once again, nature against God. And then he commented, this is a very, very funny religion that human beings have. As you develop a mystical approach where you're seeing God in everything, the word God or source is just a word for the oneness of everything. The mystery of God is within every cell of our bodies, every leaf of every tree, every atom, every molecule within everything that is God. The universe, the spirit, is the totality and the interrelatedness of all things. So we come to a place like this every single week, and we have 2 or 3 gatherings each week, as most of you know. You don't find God here, honest to God. This is not really a house of worship in any traditional sense. We gather here as like-minded people to remember some great ideas and some eternal truths. We love gathering. We love celebrating the truth. We hope never to get too organized where we become governing. Our job is always to be reminding one another that we are connected and that we are individualizations, each and every one of us, with this one life. What we're after here is the self-reliance that Emerson was teaching. What we're after here is learning to listen to the voice within. noticing what comes up for us in our moments, in our meditations, our journaling, our quiet moments. This, of course, was the message of Emerson and all the greats, including Jesus and many others. In our teaching and in this practice, we increasingly learn to rely on our spiritual intuition and our personal experience. And it is this that gives us a new vision and understanding of reality. Please don't let other people think for you. Trust yourself. Let stuff come to you. It will. It doesn't come out of any book. Now, some of us, myself included, have read a lot of books, and there's nothing wrong with that. This search, though, doesn't need to be so tedious. It doesn't need to take you 30 years. I truly wish someone had broken it down to me the way I'm attempting to you much earlier in my life. Louise Hay will always remind us that it's all very simple, and it is. The practice that we have, and here's where the challenge is in the practice. I'm going to do an overview of the teaching on Tuesday nights. I am doing one right now. It's a lot of information I'm passing on. And I don't want people in that class to try to take it all in. I just want you to just let it come in. Don't worry, just let it come in. Take in what you can wherever you are and listen, because you'll be able to listen to those tapes again. It's too much just to take in. So I'm suggesting for people who attend to just sit back and enjoy, and then begin to practice a little. When we get into our teaching, the authority that we're talking about is always within, and it's happening now. It's happening now, and it's never happening about tomorrow or next week or yesterday. God or Source will reveal itself always to you in new moments. The new moments may come softly, they may come dramatically, and you will say, aha, oh my God, like all my life, and now I see this. It's like I've been in a dark room and the light was turned on. That's how it's been for me. As you learn to love yourself and practice the teaching, you'll start to have a greater appreciation for reality, I mean in the total sense. You'll start to understand, oh my God, I'm awake in this, and I can see this eternity, this divinity in everything. You'll begin to contemplate the stars and the galaxies and the people and all of life and how it's unfolded so majestically over time, and you will sense the great magnitude, the greatness of life around you and within you. This is the mysticism. This is the mystical way, and this is who you are becoming. I remember contemplating a poem in the year 1984. I finally pinned it down when it happened. It almost caused me to have a spiritual experience that year. It was a summer, and I had spent a lot of time meditating and journaling. And I was contemplating one phrase from the mystic William Blake. I'm sure you've all heard this passage before, but it kind of like brought me to another place. It might not do anything for you, but it did for me. When he said, to see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower, and where you can hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. I'll say that again for those of you who might not have heard it before. Where you can see a world in a grain of sand, heaven in a wild flower, and where you can hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. As I recall, the next thing I knew, I was having an energetic experience there that I could never describe to another person. The point is, yes, this creative intelligence, God or Source, reveals itself to you in your own experiences. It's always going to be about you and the power that you have within you, the wisdom that you have, the aliveness that you have within you. Please don't look over to someone else for their aliveness and stuff. This is all about you getting in touch with the best kept secret of the world, that this thing, this entity, this force is alive within you. So that's the fan you want to flame. So if there's any effort at all or to go towards developing this kind of awareness, this connection, This is what we do. We want to understand that this life is within us, operating through us, and it's always seeking expression through you. I've studied world religions a bit. I'm by no means an expert. But I've studied quite a bit. I don't think it matters whether it's Christian or Hindu, Taoist, Buddhist, or the American Indians. The mystical experience that people describe is always the same. If the words I have attributed to Jesus are reliable today, we think he said, "You who have seen me have seen God." Now, each of you could say the same thing to yourself. You could look in the mirror. Because each of you are one with this creative energy. You could say to yourself and look into the mirror, "To have seen me is to have seen God." This is really who you are. As we are waking up to this great truth and to this affirmative and mystical awareness, we take in all the vast diversity of life. We just take it all in, and the intelligence and the life and the love that's everywhere. And we know that it's all good, and it's all God, and it's all divine. It was a Zen master, another Zen master, who said it in this way: "To watch a child pouring milk into a glass is to see God pouring God into God." I thought that was somewhat breathtaking when I read that. I'll say it again. To watch a child pouring milk into a glass is to see God pouring God into God. Or here it is in another way. Seeking God is like riding on an ox, looking for an ox to ride. We have to get past the past dogma, past the religious, and even we got to get past the cultural dogma. You got to really, you don't have to do anything, but what you'd like to do is to get into the now and drop the past, drop the stories, drop, all that right and wrong stuff. We want to get to the place where we rely on our inner experience. This is what Ernest Holmes was always about. He wasn't about churches. He was about us becoming empowered. He didn't care if we were meeting probably in tents or in circles or town squares or whatever it was. The less it was organized, the better. He wanted us to understand there's power for good in the universe, greater than you, of which you are a part, and you can use it because its power is in you, operating through you. It's not in the churches. It's not in the organizations. People get hypnotized with dogma. Especially if it comes in and you do it by rote and it's repeated and repeated and repeated. There's certain pieces that we read that I only read like every 4 or 5 months, because I deliberately don't want to have this look like it's like a dogmatic type of thing, because we're not teaching dogma. We're teaching that each of us have our experiences, and we learn to listen to Spirit. People of faith throughout history have made various scriptures. They turned the scriptures into supreme authority, regardless of the contradictions these scriptures have, and it's not just with one faith. Regardless of the translations and misinterpretations. This extraordinary place of experience, this kingdom that you're looking for, is within you. There's nowhere to go to experience it other than within yourself. There's no church, there's no synagogue, there's no place of worship. There is no holier place than where you are. And some of you are here today, but you know what I'm talking about. It's not about this building. We do great things here, right? But it isn't about that. This is just a building, and we're sharing with you our ideas. But the holy place is within you. I believe it was Buddha who said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." Just think about that. That's where you do your work, is with yourself. Be a lamp unto yourself. Carl Jung said of people like us who are really committed to a teaching like this, New Thought students, in other words, who really are practicing seeing the good in everyone and seeing the good in all. He said, people like you are going to become problems to organizations. He said, the creative mystic has always been a thorn in the side of the dogmatic churches, of anything dogmatic, because the creative mystic is thinking for him or herself, and they're relying on this inner awareness. But it is the mystic that we all owe what is the very best in humanity and in religion. To these few who really practice this, seeing and knowing and speaking of the good and the God only, they forever hold the vision for us all. Imagine. And so it is. Thank you.